You're going to be glad you turned in today's Joy program, the Joy program, that's what it is, because we have a great guest on today. In fact, you may have already read his book or you're going to hear about it because it is a hot one. It's called The Light That Was Dark, A Spiritual Journey. And that's not what we're really going to talk about today. We're going to mention that, but Warren Smith is our guest, and he has a BA from the University of Pennsylvania and MSW from Tulane University in New Orleans. He's been a social worker for nearly 20 years, as well as having served as a San Francisco street worker. He's held various positions serving developmentally disabled. Those are the tough people to really minister to, and mentally disabled homeless people. He is currently the coordinator of a shelter for the homeless. He and his wife Joy live in Northern California. Would you welcome Warren Smith? Warren, thank you.
Thanks.
It's good to have you.
Good to be here.
How did you ever decide to go into a field dealing with disabled people, mentally disabled and developmentally disabled? That's got to be a tough field.
It took a while. I had gotten out of the Army in 1970, went back to my hometown in Westport, Connecticut, and my life really wasn't working. And as so many of us at that time did, I went out to San Francisco and tried to start my life again. And I did a number of things. I cleaned carpets, I worked as a janitor, I worked in a nursery in Half Moon Bay, and eventually I ended up working for Travelers Aid out of the Greyhound bus station in San Francisco. And I actually called a volunteer group and said I was willing to do some volunteer work, and did they have any positions? And they said, sure, how about the Greyhound bus station? And I said, well, I don't know if I'm ready for that. And she said, sure you are. We have an excellent social worker that will supervise. And so I started out as a volunteer, and I just really liked working with people on the street. I think also at that time it kind of helped me to get past some of the obstacles that I had in my own life. I was so busy helping others, I really didn't have time to be preoccupied with myself. And then as I developed my skills working with street people, I started working for the city of San Francisco, the Department of Social Services, and then went back to graduate school in New Orleans. And San Francisco and New Orleans are probably two of the most amazing workshops for learning about dealing with people that are lost and stranded. And so I went back, got my master's degree in social work, and then came back to San Francisco and continued working there, and then ended up in Chico, California, which is northeast of Sacramento, actually. And there I did a number of jobs over the last 20 years. And sort of in the midst of all this work with the homeless and developmentally disabled, I sort of had my own spiritual journey, which took me into the depths of the New Age and a lot of spiritual deception. And eventually I came to write this book, The Light That Was Dark. So I sort of had my career out there in the world. And I might mention that as I was doing my social work and I was learning about my New Age stuff, I started to graft that in to my job, and I actually had mentally retarded, developmentally disabled clients meditating and doing things that I now sincerely regret and have prayed to the Lord about. But many of us...
that is a scary thing, because others are doing that too, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that that's really what's happening. A lot of us were getting educated in false teachings, and we were sharing those with the people that we were supposed to be helping. I know that's happening with a lot of counselors today. And so one reason that I'm really glad to be working for Salvation Army right now, directing a homeless shelter where we are, is that I can do my social work, I can reach out to the homeless with substantial, food, housing, the things that people need, but at the same time we can provide the spiritual things that they need too. And very few jobs these days, most agencies will not let you talk about God. And my boss in the Salvation Army is real glad when I talk about God. And
Amen.
Actually, in the shelter last winter, a lot of the homeless people would be lying in their bunks, and they would be reading my book, and I'd walk by and they'd say, hey, Warren, chapter 11, what about this? So it turned out to be a witness to the very people that we were serving.
Let me ask you this. When we talk about homeless people, we've talked about homeless people that more and more, it's families and it's women and children, whatever. But when somebody is developmentally disabled or mentally disabled and they end up being homeless, that has got to be it. And I understand a lot of the hospitals have closed down and they've put these people on the street. How tough is that person? Do they have any hope or future?
It's really hard. The cutbacks have been significant. I know in our county, we just keep cutting back. We actually had a program that I directed at one time that was a homeless program for the mentally disabled. That money got decategorized, and that program is gone. So what we end up is having some very disturbed people coming in to the homeless shelter. And the world's answer to that is to send them to mental health, give them more medication. and there's very little talk about the deeper needs that people have. And I think some people tend to give up on the more extreme cases, but we've seen some amazing things. We've seen people that have had voices, they're actually hearing voices, and then after talking about the Lord and really praying and sometimes renouncing occult practices that they've had in the past, the voices will stop. I know one guy in particular that went back to mental health. He was supposed to go back there to get his prescription, and he told the psychiatrist that the voices weren't there anymore, that he had prayed and that God had taken care of that. And the psychiatrist shook his head and he says, "You'll be back." And I'm afraid that's the world's response. It just doesn't understand. And I saw this man recently, and he's still doing real well. And I think that, unfortunately, mental health just doesn't tell people about the Lord. So some of the shelters and some of the places where people come, there are Christians who will go and who will share. And I think that ultimately that is the answer. And I think to think that drugs are going to do it, or just to see a regular counselor on a week-to-week basis, it can help, certainly, to talk about your problems, but to get to the root of it, a lot of the people that we have seen were abused, seriously abused when they were kids. Some had been even brought up in families that had been involved in satanic-type practices.
Wow.
And so there's some heavy-duty things that need to be worked out. And I think one of the neat things about the shelter is that we're there all night. We can always go off in the corner with somebody and talk. We don't have like a scheduled counseling session from 8 to 9. It just kind of happens and in the context of what we're doing. And also the atmosphere at our shelter, we use the National Guard armories in California. The governor has opened them up, and there's some funding that comes through both Salvation Army and FEMA. And we try to run it kind of like a big coffee house. People come in and we talk about things sort of naturally, and inevitably spiritual things get thrown into the discussion, and we're probably just always amazed that the talk about God on the streets is probably a lot more so than in a lot of the other places in town.
That's wonderful.
There's always a lot of questions.
What's the solution, as you see, to the homeless problem, especially, again, looking at the developmentally disabled, and if you could explain that term, and also the mentally disabled homeless, how far along are they mentally disabled?
Developmentally disabled, the ones that are extremely developmentally disabled are your basic, the ones that have been called mentally retarded in the past. Clients with special needs. We, in California anyway, have a lot of care homes for those particular individuals, and they're pretty well taken care of. Sometimes they'll go into independent living and they'll land in the armory. We'll usually help them get back to a care home or get some kind of special assistance that will go, like if they're living independently, people will come and help them, to cook and learn how to do certain things like that. But basically, I think in our community, and I think in a lot of communities, the cost of housing has gone up so much. Affordable housing is a real problem. And I think that we need to have more affordable housing, but that's an easy thing to say. Sure. And we have to be careful that we don't go the socialistic route and end up with a whole lot of programs where we're doing indirect socialism. But somehow affordable housing, and then I think just people getting redirected in terms of skills, getting into good rehab programs and getting definable skills that will help them get back into the marketplace. Right now in our town, really the only kinds of entry-level jobs for a lot of unskilled people are working like at fast food places. And I think Chico's a town probably in the 35,000 range. There's a university there. And the bowling alley recently had 2 minimum wage jobs that were open. And my understanding was there were over 200 people that went there, for the jobs. Another thing that might surprise some people is that I would say the large majority of the people that are staying in our shelter, if you came by and said that you had some extra work around the TV station, were there anybody that was interested, and would they come along, you'd have a busload of people that would come with you. They're willing to work, and we do have some people that have significant drinking problems and drug abuse problems that are caught in that, and they're not able to work or they're not wanting to work, but they're generally the minority. Most of the homeless are wanting and needing jobs and affordable housing.
What can people do? What would you like to see? If you could sit down to all the churches in America and they'd listen to you, what would you say we need to do for these people that are homeless, especially with problems as you're dealing with?
I think supporting your local agencies that are dealing with these problems and dealing with them in a really constructive way. I know that we have a rescue mission in our community, and they need certain things. And certainly Salvation Army, where I work, the thrift store that we have is fueled by the donations of people in the community, and then those funds are put back into the programs that we do, including staff. I think it's important to really look at where you're spending your money and contributing your money, and certainly I know that Christians, I think, should be aware of the places that are doing these things and also conveying and sharing the gospel at the same time.
All right, this is good information. We appreciate it. We're going to come back in a moment and take a look at the spiritual journey that Warren Smith went through, and especially if you're interested in what we've been talking about, the homeless. Now, we've talked about homeless before, but dealing with developmentally disabled and mentally disabled homeless people has got to be a tough thing, and it tells you that Warren's heart is big. I hope your heart is also big, and you'd say, how can I help? I want to find out in my community, wherever you are across America, what can we do to help these people, especially if they're homeless. They need another opportunity. Somebody's going to reach out and show some love and care. Now, tell me about this title, The Light That Was Dark. What's the significance?
The light that was dark is taken from Luke 11:35, when Jesus said, "Take heed that the light that is in you is not darkness." Many of us that got involved with the New Age and the false teachings of the New Age thought that what we were doing was light, was good, and was from God. And actually, Jesus warns that there is a light that's dark, and certainly the Scriptures warn that Satan comes as an angel of light sometimes, and his teachings can come as teachings that look good. And we got very involved, my wife and I got very involved in a number of things that are popular today, including A Course in Miracles, which is pretending to be Christian, New Age Christianity, which there is no such thing. They're false teachings. And really our story, which really started when a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to see a psychic who was a friend of hers. And my background was one that made me very skeptical. And seeing a psychic was really not something I would ordinarily do. But I went ahead because she legitimized it in my mind. She made it seem like it was okay. Like today, Dionne Warwick is doing the same thing on TV, encouraging people to call 900 numbers and to call psychics. And I think there's even like a little thing at the bottom of the picture that says, "For entertainment purposes only." I just can't warn people enough that it was that visit to a psychic that I did that literally propelled me into the New Age. I kicked open a door to the occult that I didn't even know was there. In Acts 16, there's an account about a psychic at Philippi, and she actually had a divining spirit, and when Paul cast the divining spirit out, she was no longer able to do her readings. And actually, Silas and Paul were thrown into the Philippian jail, and the famous jail scene all came about because a psychic lost her ability to do her readings because the divining spirit was no longer there. But I didn't know that, and this psychic was able to tell me many things about myself that were true. It went beyond coincidence, it went beyond chance, and towards the end of the reading, I actually felt a distinct whirling sensation right over the top of my head, which was quite disconcerting. I'm a pretty, was a pretty no-nonsense guy.
Sure.
And without my saying anything to her, she turned to me and she said, "Are you aware that there's a ball of light over your head right now?" And I said, "I don't know what that is, but I can feel something." And she said, "It's a ball of light. You have a lot of help on the other side." And she said that if I wanted help from this other side, which she described as the spirit realm, angels, loved ones that wanted to help me, spirits that were interested in my life, if I wanted their help, I needed to give permission. And the cover of my book, right here, I'm lying on the flat roof of my house, and I'm literally praying and saying, "You on the other side, come into my life, and I want to be more spiritual, and I want to grow." I was very, very sincere and very sincerely deceived. And what happened after that was just one thing after another came at me in the name of the New Age. I got involved with the Guru Rajneesh. A number of supernatural things happened that made me think that it was all meant to be. We were fond in those days of saying when something sort of seemed to conspire benevolently, we would say, it was meant to be. And we would just always assume that it was meant to be by good. And I'm reminded of the line in the old Bob Dylan song. He says, "It may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you're going to serve somebody." And a lot of us thought we were serving good or even serving God, and we weren't. And I went through many, many different trials that I chronicle in the book, The Light That Was Dark. But perhaps the biggest deception of all was getting involved with A Course in Miracles, which is...
Now, there are churches that I've read, churches, liberal churches perhaps, but churches actually having it, and it says, Num Church, having A Course in Miracles.
A Course in Miracles comes at the American public at this time literally trying to redefine Christianity, and we need to be very careful because this is not Christianity. The Course in Miracles, I was told and believed, that there is no need for an external Savior. We are told by the Course and by the New Age that we save ourselves by changing our thinking. There is no evil according to the New Age. It's simply a projection of our own inner darkness. And that when we learn to create our own world by changing our thinking, then our world kind of becomes a different world. Most significantly, the Course in Miracles in the New Age says that our salvation comes from us. All paths lead to God. You take your own choice. Marianne Williamson has written a book called A Return to Love, Reflections on the Principles of A Course in Miracles. Oprah Winfrey endorsed it on her show, said it was one of the best books that she'd ever read, and that Oprah even bought 1,000 copies and gave them to everybody in the audience that day. And the Course in Miracles, the bottom line is that it purports to come from Jesus. It's a channeled work. A woman, a psychologist in New York City, heard an inner voice in the mid-'60s saying, "This is A Course in Miracles, please take notes." And she did. And the voice pretended to be Jesus, and it was published in 1975, given a lot of publicity through Gerald Jampolsky's book, Love is Letting Go of Fear. He appeared at the Crystal Cathedral, spoke on that podium at one time.
Really?
Yeah, the New Age sneaks in everywhere. Marianne Williamson gave lectures on the Course in Miracles at the Methodist Church and the Episcopal Church in Hollywood. The Methodist Church in Hollywood is one of the most beautiful churches, and like in the last month, I was down there and I went to the Methodist Church and said, on a hunch, did Marianne Williamson teach her Course in Miracles classes here? And the woman sort of said, well, that was 6 years ago. So this was like 6 years ago. And then she said, but she went to the Episcopal Church after that. And this is not to condemn the Methodist Church or the Episcopal Church.
Right.
It's to show
people make mistakes.
It's to show how we throw up in our churches, trying to be open, and the enemy will come right in and start to teach a whole new thing, New Age Christianity, which is everything that Jesus warned us to watch out for.
Okay, now what is it about Course of Miracles, if you could take 2 or 3 or 5 things that are really blasphemous or things that bother you about it?
The Course in Miracles, the question is asked in the Course, is Jesus the Christ? And the Course in Miracles answer is, oh yes, along with you. Everyone is Christ. And, we focus on the false Christ of Waco, and everybody is shocked.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we all sit in front of Oprah Winfrey, taking in this new philosophy that she's endorsing and that Marianne Williamson's best-selling book is talking about, and it says we're all Christ. So it's no wonder sometimes that we're referred to as sheep in the Bible. We tend to be very gullible.
Yes.
The Bible is very explicit that there is a false Christ, another gospel, another Jesus, that there would be perversions. And I think 1 Timothy 4:1 hits it right on the nose. It says that the Spirit explicitly says in the latter times, some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of demons. The Course in Miracles was an inner voice that said that it was the truth and that it was Jesus. Jesus Christ in the Bible said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. It isn't like there are a whole lot of paths out there and we just kind of pick which one we want and we all kind of get there. And unfortunately, that's not the prevailing attitude in society today. I found out the hard way with my wife. We literally, in the midst of our New Age journey, had to deal with an evil presence. And the Course in Miracles and our New Age teachings said that evil was an illusion. We sent light, we meditated, we repeated Course in Miracles affirmations like, in my defenselessness, my safety lies. Kind of the opposite of put on the full armor of God and stand fast against the wiles of the devil. We consulted our New Age leaders. Nothing worked. We were like the house that was built on sand. And it was only when I was in a New Age bookstore in Hermosa Beach, actually in a regular bookstore in the New Age section in Hermosa Beach, and saw this book called The Beautiful Side of Evil by Johanna Michelson, a Christian book that somehow God got into that section. I read about how she dealt with the deception in her life. She had a spirit guide that she thought was actually Jesus. It was a deceptive spirit. And I wrote down what she said, and the next day when this evil spirit was again present, and by the way, had never left when we did any of our New Age solutions, the presence was there. I told my wife, Joy, let's go out in your mom's backyard. I want to try something different. I had believed Johanna Michelson, and addressing the presence, I said, Satan, in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, I command you to be gone. It was like whoosh, gone, like that. Joy turned to me and she said, it's gone. I said, there's something about the cross of Calvary and Jesus' victory over Satan and over evil and over sin that is beyond anything that we had really understood. And we just called on that victory. And it took us a while. I wish I could say that we fell on our faces and understood the gospel at that moment. But it took us about 4 months, but we started reading the Bible. We recognized that the Bible had the truth and that all of our New Age teachings were really what Jesus was warning us to watch out for when he said, "Take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many." The Course in Miracles is doing that. New Age teachings are doing that. I can only just be so grateful that Jesus made himself known to us and that we saw the true power and victory of the cross of Calvary. And the Bible stands on its own. We don't need to have all these New Age teachers explaining what it really is.
Amen. Oh, I want to read the book now. I'm really excited about reading the book. I hope you want to read the book too. I want to read the whole journey. And again, you need to understand that this is someone who was there and studied it and walked through the journey, not someone just talking about something they've heard about. He was there. He walked through this journey. And so I hope you'll find yourself to find the book and get it and read it, and then give it to somebody who's in the New Age. They may think it's just something new, the New Age. It's the occult. It's the enemy. It's demonic.
It's the old lie.
It's the old lie, exactly. And if you would like to read a book that